Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Local Leaders of the Podcast. And I'm excited, y'all. Today, there's a guest across from me that I know pretty darn well. He handles a lot of not only my personal stuff that comes up just from, life happening, but he also handles my business stuff. And so, it's not your typical lawyer show. Let's put it that way. And he is not your typical lawyer. He is Ben Bartage. He is owner of Bartage Law Firm. And first, I want to welcome him to Local Leaders of Podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Happy to be here.
I'm excited. We've been planning this one a while, you and I. Between my busy work that I do myself and Ben's busy work that he does, we've finally been able to line up. But Ben has a very interesting story of how he not only came about becoming a lawyer. It's kind of in his blood, and you'll find out a little about that. But also the manner in which he practices law is very interesting, and so we're going to discuss a little of that. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
Born and raised in Shreveport.
Yes.
When I was 12, we moved to a little town north of Shreveport called Benton. So I graduated from Benton High School.
Yeah, Denham played them earlier this past football season, and you congratulated me.
I did. Yeah, it was a very wild ending to the game. But
Boy,
congrats to the Yellow Jackets.
Yes, and so Benton, Louisiana, which is way up north, almost to Arkansas, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 45 minutes away from the Arkansas border, and also about 30 minutes from Texas. So very northwest corner of the boot.
Yeah, there you go. And so you ended up in Baton Rouge at some point. Tell us how that happened.
Well, when I was a sophomore in high school, I visited LSU, and I said, I don't want to go anywhere else.
Really?
So came down in 2004 to go to LSU for undergrad, stuck around for an MBA and my law degree, and didn't move. So I've been here since 2004.
And a huge LSU fan, incidentally, y'all. There's not many people more LSU fan oriented than Ben Bartage. Would you agree?
Well, there's some there's some competition out there as far as the top LSU fans, but I do love it passionately. I go to most of the home games, and it's just, on a nice Saturday afternoon, Saturday night in Death Valley, where would you rather be?
Oh yeah, hard to beat that atmosphere. There's no doubt about it. And so you got into, obviously, the law practices, which is what we're going to talk about today. And your dad was also a lawyer?
Yeah, dad went to Tulane, and he's been practicing in Shreveport since the late 70s. He's on his own, and he runs a general practice. And so that was kind of the basis that I use to set up my law practices. I want to be able to help people in a variety of ways. The person who comes to me needing a will, if they get hurt in a car wreck, a couple months later, they already know me. Yeah. They already know I can do a good job for them. And I want to make sure that I'm knowledgeable in both areas of the law so that I can help people regardless of the way that they may need help in. Yeah,
I love that. And one of the best advantages to using you, I hate to use that term, using you. That almost sounds negative,
employing you.
Yeah, they're employing
using
you.
Your services.
Using your services is the fact that you have such a vast knowledge of law. And you'll find a lot of lawyers out there, and they'll specialize in something. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you specialize in something, you probably become an expert at it in most cases. But you have a very vast knowledge just outside the law. And that's kind of the first thing I want to bring up, because you're not typical in that you owned a business that was not a law firm before you owned a law firm, correct?
That is correct. My path to starting the law firm is unconventional.
That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you did prior to that.
Yeah. So, I'm studying for the bar, and a good friend of mine, he was a chemical engineer PhD student. Mm-hmm. And he had an idea basically to connect the buyers and sellers of the raw materials that are used to produce alternative fuel sources. And long story short, that idea didn't pan out because natural gas prices hit the floor. This was around 2013.
Yeah.
And so interest in alternative fuels kind of took a nosedive.
Right.
And so we couldn't get the funding that we needed to build the software. But out of that, we had been talking with a lot of farmers in the due diligence for that business idea. And the farmers were like, well, heck, why don't you just sell my food crops? So the business was called Indie Plate, okay?
Yep.
And it was basically the farmer's market delivered. And we had a lot of local vendors that we worked with and sold, like French Settlement roasters that you had on here a couple weeks ago. They would be an example of a type of vendor that we would sell. So local mom and pops, and you could order it from the website and get it delivered. And we ran that business from summer of 2013 until February of 2018 when it sold to Waiter.
Wow. Very interesting.
And I started my law practice in 2014 in the middle of that because I realized that I could start the law practice. The law practice was initially my side hustle that I could start it.
How often do you hear that?
I could start it for $400. I could start it for $400 and no recurring monthly costs. And so I'm like, well, it'd be stupid not to, set up an LLC, get the equipment that I need to fax, print, scan stuff from home.
Yeah.
And then Indie Plate had its own conference room, and I just set up another business address there. Got the mail sent there. We were leasing space at Celtic Studios because it was very centrally located in town. And my first case ever was for $400, so I broke even on my first case.
Wow!
And Lord's works in mysterious ways like that.
Really?
So yeah, that's how I started the law practice. As you mentioned, my dad's an attorney, so that was a huge help at first.
Yeah.
People would call me, and at first, I needed his advice and guidance on how to best help my clients.
No doubt about it.
But now we call each other, and he's asking me as much as I'm asking him because I do
that
more.
Makes you feel good, don't it?
Yeah, I do more business. Helping people start businesses, more contracts and stuff like that than he does.
That's right. And something very important to bring up, of course, when I started my businesses here, me and Ben had several conversations. Even when I was side hustling this business, still working for another company, I would kind of go to Ben and tell him my ideas and kind of try to judge his facial reactions and say, does he think I'm crazy? Does he think? But fortunately, it looked like he was always interested and thought that I had some pretty good ideas, or he hit it real well that if he thought otherwise. But really leaned on him for advice because I had a massive amount of respect for what he had already done. And so I knew that this was someone that kind of knew what they were talking about. They didn't go to school and get a degree and just everything they learned was classroom based. They lived it. They went through what you want to say is the real world side of business, which you can't learn in a classroom.
No. And to be honest with you, running Indie Plate was much tougher than running the law practice.
Yeah.
Now people are paying me for my time. I have no cost of goods sold. I don't have to worry about,
orders being late,
or, the blueberries that we just got from Morrow Farms in Ponchatoula, are they going to still be good tomorrow? You're dealing with perishable product. You're dealing with, what's the best route to take logistically, not only to pick up the product, but to deliver it. How are we staying in contact with our customers? How are we doing our marketing? So it was much more involved. Now people call me and they say, hey, Ben, I need a wheel, or I got rear-ended in a car accident. I'm like, okay, well, here's the path that we're going to take to get where we need to be. And it's very straightforward, and, I can work at any hours of the day. When I first started the law practice, I was taking these calls while I was on the road to pick up lettuce and strawberries, and
that's a good point.
And I had to remember to, take people's emails down, and when the day ended around 9 o'clock, I'd start doing the work for the law practice. And most of what I do can be done at any time, which is helpful now that I've got a young son.
Oh yeah.
But,
beautiful young son. Yes.
But yeah, no, that helped me to to develop the work ethic that I feel you really need as a business owner in order to be successful.
It's a pace.
In school, thankfully I have a good memory. So school for the most part is just memorization and regurgitation. They're not actually testing you on how much you actually know.
Right.
It's, oh yeah, I remember that. And it works out.
Right.
But owning Indie Plate really showed me what I was capable of as far as perseverance, because it was really tough, and I was working 70 to 80 hour weeks at the time.
Man, you just hit the nail on the head too. It really is. It's perseverance is probably the best way to describe what you need more than anything else in any business. Because it's hard. It's not easy. It's when you're in business, people that are on the outside of that look at it and they think, oh, this is great. He can take vacation whenever he wants. He can do all these things. And it's make a ton of money. You're not sharing it with anybody.
You need to pay $30 an hour minimum wage.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. I can't afford it.
That's right. And when you start, the amount of hours that you put in, if you divide that times what you're making, usually you're making like less than minimum wage. Because you're working 24 hours a day almost building a business.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at first it's a money losing endeavor, right? It's your
100%.
own personal money that you're putting in. Like for you, I'm sure you had to buy this podcast equipment.
Yes.
You had to buy the lights and the camera and the microphones, and that's before you ever
did a podcast,
have a guest on the show.
Right.
And
huge upfront investment.
Until you experience it and go through it, there's no way to really understand it. And I feel like that, for our son, we're planning on homeschooling, and I'm gonna have him start a little business so that he can understand. There's nothing more valuable in terms of education in my experience, because there's so many people who want to knock on business owners, or think that they have the standing to tell business owners how they need to run their business, but they've never done it, and they have no idea how tough it is.
That's right. They have no idea. And you mentioned, even with your son, have him start a little business when he's younger and kind of learn. Number one, you learn the value of a dollar, but you also learn how to talk to people and conduct business. And I'll tell you a quick little story. When I was 9, a friend of mine, Jeff, which I hadn't seen Jeff since we were probably 14. So shout out Jeff if you're listening somewhere. But me and a guy named Jeff started a lawn mowing business. And I actually still have the flyer, which is now, it looks like an old pirate map. It's all tattered and yellow. And, from that time we ham wrote it. But, we cut your grass for like $5. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I could get all kinds of business now with that. But shout out Servicare, who doesn't charge $5.
Yes. Hey, Billy.
Yeah, but very fair at Servicare. But I'll tell you, I still have that, and I put it in a frame a while back because that was my first exposure to business, and that was at 9 years old. And just the value that I learned from doing that, even though we only had like 3 yards, and it was older ladies that, just was throwing us a bone, really. It taught me the value of hard work. It taught me that I had to, if I said I was going to cut your grass at 6 o'clock in the morning, we had to get up at 6 and go cut your grass, right? So a lot of value in that. And I credit a lot of that stuff to my work ethic now, for sure, because you got to have it in business. No doubt about it. Now, talking about your business, you don't just do business-oriented stuff, although that is a part of it. And what I use you for, I've used you for everything from opening LLCs, writing contracts, another huge thing that you do. We have podcast contracts here that we write, and or that we have people sign, and it was Bartage Law that formatted that for us. And so those are some things, if you're in a business where there's some contractual needs that you need to satisfy, Ben Bartage is your man. Agree with that?
I do, yeah. So, I mean, businesses are going to have several needs. First, you have to create the entity with the Secretary of State. So, usually an LLC is the best fit. You know, it's cheap to form, gives people the protection that they need. It's a favorable tax status. And that's what I do the most of. But if someone needs a C corporation or a registered partnership, I'm capable of forming all of those entities. Usually it's best to just do an LLC. In my experience, that's usually the best fit for the clients. If there's more than one owner, then it's going to make sense to have an operating agreement. Yeah. So that's the agreement that governs the relationship between the business owners. What if somebody wants out? What if somebody isn't holding up their end of the bargain? Who's going to be responsible for signing off on tax returns? Does everybody have check writing authority? So those are things that you want to put in writing. Handshake deals are great, but circumstances can change.
They can, even if it's your best friend.
Yeah. What if best friend, has some health issues, and just isn't able to keep going? You want to agree in writing on, okay, well, what's the payout going to be, or how are we going to structure this? And then you also want to plan in your will. So what if it's a family business, but you have multiple kids, and what if one kid isn't interested in running the business, but the other is? Okay, well, there's value associated with the business. So how do you make up for that?
Right.
And so it's important from a legacy planning perspective. What if you want your employees to run it, but they can't afford to buy it? How do you address these situations? And it's unique for every business owner, but it's something that should be addressed.
100%.
How is the business going to be managed if you're incapacitated? You might not want somebody to have the authority to run your business on a day-to-day basis, but in the event that you're unable to do it, it's good to have a backup document in place. And that's called, I do it through a limited power of attorney that springs into effect, upon XYZ conditions,
Wow, that's a very good point to bring up. I don't know if I have one of those, but a very good point to bring up. And I'll tell you, Ben, I tell people all the time, when they sign things with me, I say, this isn't a trust issue. This isn't I'm trying to trap you in some kind of agreement. This is I want to make sure there is no miscommunication here, even with my best friend. So if my best friend and I decide we're going to split things 50-50, if it's in writing and we go over it and we sign it, then we know it's there. And there's never a case where, wait a minute, we were going to do this 60-40, or I thought you said this and you said that. It's all in writing. It's just it's really a method of not having an issue with miscommunication, because I used to see that all the time in my old world that I worked in.
Yeah, look, I mean, if people mean what they say, they shouldn't have a problem reducing it to writing.
Right.
They shouldn't.
It's a protection for both parties.
Exactly.
That's the way I look at that. So if you're listening right now and you're considering opening a business, or maybe you have a business and you're in a partnership, but you don't have an operating agreement, and you're like, Ben's right, I need to probably look into getting that. This is your guy, I'm telling you. And we're going to give you some information at the end of the podcast, how you can contact him. And he'll give you all the information you need. One interesting thing that I want to bring up is when you call, if he doesn't answer, he actually calls you back. That's the first key. The second key is he actually calls you back. It's not a firm where there's 600 lawyers underneath one lawyer that you see on TV, and you're never going to have that guy represent you. It's really the people underneath him. You hire Ben Bartage, you get Ben Bartage, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, my number 225-364-9182 is a direct number. So you call me, you get me. Yep. If I don't answer, I will call you back. And that is a work cell. So I'm able to text. I know a lot of people like to text in this day and age. So,
yeah.
Also comes in very handy for accident cases, for instance, where people are taking pictures of the scene of the accident and they don't necessarily know how to email the pictures that they're taking, but they can just text them to me.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the main complaints that people voice about lawyers are, I can't get him or her on the phone. And boy, I had no idea it was going to cost that much, Yeah. So I try to charge flat fees, because I don't want people to be scared to call me saying, oh, I can't call Ben because he's going to bill me, for this 5 minutes.
And it happens, call. Ben. I have friends who have dealt with some attorneys where they have questions, but they don't want to call because every time they call, they get billed.
Yeah. So
it's not good.
I want to be there for the big stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you need me, I'm going to be there for you, and I am going to get paid. If you need a contract, if you need an operating agreement, if you need a will, I will get paid. But if you have a quick question about something, I want to be there. I want to be your lawyer, you know? And so just call me. You're not going to get a surprise bill in the mail, and I think you can attest to
Yes, I can attest to that. And I'll tell you, he was Johnny on the spot and is Johnny on the spot anytime I've needed him. Very knowledgeable. And let's talk about something. So we've talked about the business side of what you do and how you can help someone if they're opening a business or they already have one. Maybe they're looking to enter a partnership, or maybe they already have one, but they don't have all the paperwork they really need. Ben can help with all that, but there's some other things he does. And I want to get into the, unfortunate accidents that people get in, obviously on the road. When you talk to an attorney just in general, and let's say it's a criminal matter, the attorney will always say, "We'll never talk to the police. Always wait for your lawyer."
And they're right.
Yeah. And whether you did it or not, because what's going to happen is you may say something that you don't realize may incriminate you, and a lawyer would know that. So there's probably similar advice, or is there any advice you would give someone that gets in a car accident relative to talking to an insurance company? What should you talk to the other insured or no?
Yeah, usually no.
Yeah.
What you'll want to do is you'll want to take a lot of pictures, right after the accident. Take a lot of pictures of the scene of the accident, the roadway, your car, the other person's car. And then just keep good records. So the police will give a reference number for what the accident report's going to be. And then at that point, in my opinion, it's going to be best to just call an attorney because we know what to do.
Right.
And it's better to navigate, help the client navigate the situation than them trying to do it on their own.
Yeah.
I had one of my favorite accident stories ever is a friend of mine was injured in an 18-wheeler wreck. And they offered her $2,000 plus 6 months of medical bills. Okay. Well, the first 6 months, she was like, "Well, I'm in pain, but I'll be okay.
I can manage.
I can manage." And so she did some physical therapy, some chiropractic treatment, but her medical bills for the first 6 months were only like $3,000.
Right.
The case went on for a few years, but at the end of the day, I was able to get her over $200,000. Which is over 100 times what the insurance company was initially offering.
It's crazy, huh?
And most of those, her medical bills, I was able to help get those negotiated, but her medical bills were over $100,000.
Wow.
What if she had taken that settlement?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they don't understand because maybe they need the money, and maybe the insurance company offers them $5,000 or $10,000, and they're whispering in the injured person's ear, "Hey, look, a lawyer's just going to take part of what you're getting. Don't hire a lawyer, just take this, and you're going to come out ahead."
That's probably your first clue you need a lawyer.
Really, oftentimes that turns out not to be the case.
Yeah.
Especially if you're injured, and we don't take any fees on the property damage. So we help make sure that you get back in a vehicle, because I know that's usually people's primary concern.
Sure.
After an accident. We only take fees on the bodily injury, and I've never taken more than my client got in their pocket.
Yeah, very good. And, it's also important to mention that sometimes in an accident, you're not going to know you're hurt those first few days. It's kind of like when you work out for the first time. You got to, we'll dial this down to like a term everybody can understand. Maybe you ain't worked out in a year, and then you decide you're going to go to Anytime Fitness and you do some bench press. And the next day you're like, my guns look a little bit bigger and I'm a little tight, but everything looks good. And then the day after that, it's like the worst pain you've ever felt in your life. You're walking around, with your arms straight out.
Right.
You cannot do anything. It's 3 and 4 days after where you hurt. That first day, you just kind of feel good and feel positive about yourself. And then eventually that works itself out. But car accidents can be the same way. You can actually realize you got a back problem weeks, maybe months later.
Well, yeah, it's going to depend on there's a variety of ways that people get injured in auto accidents. And sometimes they do get worse over time, but it's important to obtain medical treatment as soon as possible after the accident so that you can establish in the medical records, because the insurance company just isn't going to take your word for it.
Right.
You know, you can't go to the doctor 8 months later and say, oh, this is back pain that I've been dealing with the whole time since the accident, because they're going to say, oh, well, no, they tripped and fell at their house. You know, if they were really hurt, they would have gotten medical treatment right after the accident. And a lot of, especially the guys, you know, the guys are like, oh man, I can tough it out. You know? And I believe you. You know, I believe that you're capable of tolerating the pain. But here's the thing, is that your life has been impacted due to the fault of someone else. This is not, you know, your own fault. This is not you hurting yourself while you're working on your car or something like that. You know, this is something that has a chance to impact your ability to play with your kids. That has an, you know, and you know,
that's a good point.
It can impact your ability to earn a living. You know, and you want to make sure that the insurance company who insures the person responsible pays you fair value for your claim. You know, I'm not trying to take grandma's savings.
Right.
You know, I'm not trying to take her life savings. I'm just trying to make sure that the insurance that she pays for compensates my clients fairly, you know, or, you know, regardless of who's at fault. You know, I'm generally not trying to take assets away from that person. I'm just trying to make their insurance company pay fair value, which they don't want to do.
No.
And you have to make them do it, you know, unfortunately, more often than not.
Sadly, and, you know, a lot of those insurance companies will ask you the famous question, which is, are you hurt? And, I mean, I'm no attorney, but I'm smart enough to know not to answer that question. I mean, I just tell them, unless I'm clearly hurt, you know, even if I'm not sure if I'm hurt, I'm talking to Ben first. I'm just like, you know, I don't know. I just got in the wreck. My adrenaline's kind of up right now. I'll get back to you on that. Maybe I'm a little tight. I don't know. I mean, but I'm not a doctor. How do I know if I'm hurt? Right.
Yeah. And I'm not a doctor either. Right.
Yeah.
So my advice to anyone who's in an accident would be, you know, go get checked out. Tell the doctors exactly what you're feeling. I'm not capable of diagnosing anyone as an attorney, but if you have a concern, you know, that you may be hurt or you're feeling pain or discomfort, then absolutely, you know, you need to go get medical treatment. You need to tell the doctors what you've been experiencing since the accident, so that you can establish it clearly in the medical records, you know, and preserve that and present that to the insurance company.
100%. So if you are, you know, save this number that he just gave you. And look, we're going to put all his contact information, everything in the description of this video, but put it in your glove box. And I'm telling you, he's a phenomenal lawyer when it comes to personal injury, as much as he is all the other things that he does. So put that in your glove box after we're done. Now we're going to talk about something else that you do. Little unpleasant subject, but something we have to talk about. And I'm sure something that the majority of people don't understand, and that is successions.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, it is unfortunate, you know, but we all do pass away.
Yeah.
And so the succession is the process in Louisiana by which property is transferred from a person who has passed away down to their heirs. Okay. Yes. And so when someone calls me and says they need a succession, you know, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, well, did they have a will? You know, because we need to know right off the bat, is their property going to be inherited according to the terms that they specified in a will, or is it going to be inherited under the default provisions of Louisiana law, you know, which is very different and unique. You know, a lot of people think that, well, I'll get kids who are, you know, children of people who maybe their mom just passed away and their dad had passed away a few years before that. Yeah. And they think, oh, well, dad died first, so mom just gets everything. It doesn't work like that in Louisiana. Inheritance is not automatic, number one. Yeah. And number two, ownership does not transfer to the spouse in the absence of a will. Yes. And so that surprises a lot of people.
Yeah, it surprised me before. I had some deals with I don't want to get too personal, but I knew some people that actually that was an issue. It being the fact that the spouse did not, especially when you have kids, because they actually, if you own a piece of property, they actually have ownership of that along with the spouse.
It's called, if it's community property, then it's called naked ownership. So the children can't sell the property. You know, the spouse would have to consent, and the spouse gets what's known as a usufruct. But it can be a real pain, particularly if the surviving parent and the child doesn't get along, or if you have a blended family, you know. So what if the spouse who was survived is not, you know, the biological parent of one of the children? And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to have a will, so that, you know, you can set forth your wishes very clearly. You know, there's a lot of, if people go online and try to do their own research about estate planning, they're going to encounter some websites that tell people that they need a trust. And in Louisiana, the succession process, it's not that bad. I just handled a multi-million-dollar estate. Nobody had to go to court. It was done in 3 weeks. Wow. It was in Lafayette. I submitted everything via mail. 3 weeks. So people talk about, you know, your assets getting tied up for years in probate court. Doesn't happen in Louisiana unless somebody's trying to contest the will, you know, which it's going to be a nightmare no matter where you are. Okay. But trusts, I do them and they make sense sometimes, but more often than not, I'm telling people, look, you don't need to spend that kind of money. You don't need to transfer your assets out of your name into a trust. Just do a will. You know, do a will, and then you can do what's known as a testamentary trust. If you have young kids, for instance,
right,
oftentimes it makes sense to leave their inheritance to a testamentary trust, because 18-year-olds usually aren't capable of handling, you know, 6 or 7 figures. When they turn 18.
I know I wasn't at 18.
I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody ever who. Not to say that person
that'd have been bad.
Not to say that person doesn't exist or hasn't existed, but I don't know him or her.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so a testamentary trust, you know, controls how, when, and why kids get their inheritance. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can say, here's how I want the money to be spent. We're going to give them X amount per year for college tuition. And instead of giving the child the check, we're just going to cut the tuition check directly to the institution. You know, we're going to pay the rent on the child's behalf. And then when they turn 25 or 30 are the most common ages, but then we'll give them the entirety of their inheritance, you know, because they're more mature at that point. They understand how to budget. They understand what their life goals are, and they're going to be able to use this money in a much more suitable way. And in the meantime, it can be invested and you can, you know, derive income from it. And then they can see how assets can grow over time. And so it makes sense. If you have grown children though, and they're responsible, you know, I don't think you need to tie up their inheritance in a trust.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Very good. And so obviously, even if you don't have, you know, people think of wills and they think, oh, well, I need like a ton of assets to have a will. And, you know, only rich people have wills and that kind of thing. I think if you have any assets, you need a will, even if it's just a house, you know, a humble house, you probably need a will.
I agree. Yeah, it's going to be important to name an executor for the estate, because even if you die without a will and the kids are going to split everything, who's in charge? You know, who's in you know, and that can be something that leads to infighting, you know.
Yeah.
Also, the executor is entitled by law to 2.5% of the value of someone's estate, unless you have a will that provides otherwise, right? And so if you've got $1 million estate, that's $25,000, you know? And so you can cap, you know, the executor's fee in the will, you know?
Right.
Also, if you have minor children, the will is where you name the legal guardian for the child. You know, that it's terrible and it's tragic, you know, but people do pass away and they leave behind kids who are under the age of 18, you know, and legally there needs to be someone who is responsible for them, you know? And so if both parents have passed on, you know, you need to designate, Louisiana calls it a tutor or tutrix, other states call it a guardian, but the will is the proper place to do that.
Wow. So many things to consider with that. And, you know, nobody likes to think about death, that, you know, and especially when you're younger, you're in your 40s, you think you're going to live forever. Right. And you feel good. But probably the best thing you can do for your family is to make sure you have a will, and it will avoid a lot of issues. Ben can help you with that. Ben can help if you don't have one and you have a situation where someone has passed away and you need to perform a succession. You're totally skilled at that and have done, I don't know, countless amounts, I'm sure, of successions over the years.
Yeah, I have, and there's different types of successions.
Yeah.
Testate, it means someone died with a will. Intestate means they died without a will.
Yeah.
If somebody dies with a very small estate, Louisiana defines a small succession as one with less than $125,000 in assets. Okay.
Yeah.
So if someone dies with a small estate, you can actually do what's known as a small succession affidavit. Mm-hmm. And that can transfer the property down to the heirs without the need for a judge to sign off on anything. So those are less expensive. And it's good that the law, allows that to happen without the heirs, needing to spend more to go through the court system.
Gotcha.
But to answer your question, yes, I've done a lot of them, but everyone is different.
Yeah.
And it's always fact specific.
Very good. Very good. So look into that if you see a need there. He can help you with all that. And now we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, not really, but the IRS, our buddies at the Internal Revenue Service. And I just got no love for those guys. And Ben can help with people with some IRS issues, right?
I can, yeah. I've been able to save my clients millions of dollars in tax liability. I am not a tax advisor or a tax attorney. I don't advise people on how to file their tax returns or tell them what deductions they can take. But if they messed up and they didn't file tax returns for a while or filed them but weren't able to pay the tax owed, I can help them negotiate the balance. And the IRS communicates with me instead of my client. So, I take the headache of dealing with the IRS out of my client's hands. And basically, I'm just acting as a mediator and a negotiator on my client's behalf and helping them get the best deal that they can.
Yeah. So I had a friend at one point, and he went, I'll never forget this. In my old world, I was a paint salesman. He was a painter that bought from us, and I'm not going to name him here, but he told me he came in the store one day and he said, man, I went to get gas and used my debit card and it wouldn't take. I don't know what's going on. And it was just a passing thing. And then a few days later, I talked to him and he said, you wouldn't believe what happened. I said, what? He said, the IRS locked up all my accounts. I said, what? And I was surprised they could do that without going to court.
The IRS and the Louisiana Department of Revenue, which if you owe taxes, the Louisiana Department of Revenue is worse. So prioritize the Department of Revenue because they're like a loan shark. They'll break your thumbs and then kick you while you're down. They're terrible. But they can both freeze your bank accounts without
no due process.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say about that I can put on air, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. But I will say that that there's a lot of I'm sure nightmare stories that people have dealing with sometimes people just get in a situation where they cannot pay their tax. Maybe they get scared and they think, well, it's better to just ignore it. And then they get to a point they get so far behind with these penalties and interest and all these things. And not only can Ben help you kind of navigate that, but he can even negotiate a lower than what was owed tax, right?
The term tax, they're not necessarily going to negotiate the tax portion, but you can negotiate the penalties and interest.
Yeah.
And you can also, in certain instances, file what's known as an offer in compromise, okay? Mm-hmm. Which is basically, that's acknowledging, look, I owe this much, but I can only afford to pay this much. So when you see the commercials on TV saying, I owed $1 million, but I only paid the IRS $5,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
That's an offer in compromise. Okay.
Yeah.
But let me tell you about the person who got that deal. Their life sucks. Okay.
Yeah.
They have no assets. They have no income because the only way that a deal like that would ever get accepted is if they have no real estate, if their income is incredibly low.
They have nothing to take.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They have nothing to take.
Yeah. So all of that being said, the big thing to take out of that is Ben will communicate with them and you won't have to. And he kind of knows the law, obviously, and we as layman people don't. And they can't intimidate you. They'll be dealing with Ben, and Ben's not intimidatable. At least to my knowledge, I never seen him intimidated. So, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So,
not by the IRS anyway.
Right. So definitely he can help you in that respect as well. Now let me ask you this question. All the things that you do in the wide array of things, and one thing we do want to mention. We may have some people here saying, "Oh, well, he seems like a great divorce attorney," and Ben, I don't think you want to kind of play in that field too much. Is that something you?
Yeah. So, I mean, nothing against attorneys that handle that, but basically, I'm a Christian. I believe in the Bible, and the Bible's pretty clear that God doesn't like divorce.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't have a legal right to obtain one.
Sure.
But I don't want to be involved in facilitating the breakup of families.
Yeah.
I don't want to help facilitate that.
Right.
And so, there are people that I will refer to, I get calls, at least once a week saying I need a divorce or I have a custody issue. And, there's an attorney that I refer out, her.
Yeah.
And she does a great job,
Yep.
and I have nothing against anybody who's seeking those services. It's just not something that I want to provide personally.
Absolutely. So if you had that question, there you go. And he'll still be glad to talk to you and refer you to someone that specializes in that. And I would imagine in that world, that's what you're going to want is someone that's all they do. And so they know the ins and outs of that process.
Yeah. I mean, if you're handling those types of cases, then you're going to have a lot of volume most likely. And those clients are always, going to be calling because you're dealing with, people trying to take your stuff and also trying to take your kids, and so it's very, very bitter. And not for me,
not for you. Look, I can respect that. And you mentioned your faith, very strong in your faith. Would you say you were a faith-based guy that kind of leads you in everything you do?
Yeah, I think so. So for my injury clients, I pray for their healing. Like I don't want them to be hurt. I really don't.
Yeah.
I wish that it wouldn't have happened, but if it did happen, I feel like I can do a good job for you. But and then for my clients who are dealing with grief, in the succession process, but I am a faith-based person, and I try to help my clients navigate through the situation in a way that honors God and honors Jesus. And, that's what's most important to me at the end of the day. We're all human beings trying to make a living, but life is fragile, it's finite, and I do believe in life after death.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. And I met you through a networking group called BNI. You're an active member. I've been in BNI forever and a day. And I say that to say this. You'll see a lot of attorneys, they'll have billboards all over I-10 and I-12, right? And they're all over the TV, and they have literally some of these, and I got nothing against it. Look, if you want to sponsor some shows, I'm all for you. But they spend a ton of money on advertising on billboards and TV. There's something to be said for me, for someone that gets the majority of their business from referral.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the referral is the best form of advertising in my mind.
Well, it's an honor because most of my clients are by referral, and it's people that I've helped before or that know me personally, and they say, look, Ben's done a good job for me. He can help you. And then I do. And then that's somebody else that I've helped that,
Yep.
that can refer me on, so it's exponential potential, right?
Absolutely.
And it is an honor, and that is the way I choose to run my business. But nothing against the billboard.
No,
guys.
heck no. I
know people that work for them.
Yeah.
And high integrity. They get a lot of flack. So I just, without people knowing them, knowing who they are, or knowing what the insurance companies try to do to people. The fact of the matter is, if the insurance companies treated people fairly, there wouldn't be a need for the billboard lawyers,
right? Right.
But the fact of the matter is, they don't want to treat people fairly, and That's why there's a need. That's why there's a need for their services.
That's right. And I agree 100%. And obviously nothing against those guys. I put a lot of value into referral. And so my point with all that is when people continue to refer you and their friends and on down the line, like you just said, that speaks volumes about how you've handled them. And so you've obviously been able to make good living, doing what you do as you should. And so I find it amazing and a big feather in your cap that you've been able to do that without having to have the biggest billboard in Baton Rouge, right? I mean, you've been able to do that because this person referred you to this person and it built. And so I'm leading up to this, and that is B&I, which you've been a member of a long time. How valuable has that been for your business?
So the tagline for B&I is giver's gain. And I'm very thankful I've been able to give and receive that's over $300,000 in business since December of 2015. So really, starting in 2016.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really helpful, to me, but I've met a lot of people. I think that, based on the way that I get business, that it's important that I meet and know as many people as possible so that then they can refer me and I can refer them, but there's been people that you've had on your show who are members and that's how you know them, that's how you know me, and it's been a good thing. That's right.
Very good. So any business owner out there that may be listening, the value of networking is an invaluable source that I wish I would have learned at a younger period in my career, because sometimes it makes it a little less hard when you have other people fighting for you and speaking up for you and how you handle your business, whatever it may be. It just makes it a simpler process. When I was a young buck out there selling paint, it was work. And look, I earned my stripes, but I wish I would have figured out the value of networking back then. So that y'all's a lesson for today on networking right there. Go check it out if you don't know much about it. Ben, let me ask you this. There's people that are hearing this right now and they're like, how do I get in touch with this guy? I need a succession. I need a will. I just got in a wreck, whatever it is. One more thing we want to talk about though, before we get to that, tickets. People get tickets sometimes. Can you help them with tickets?
Yeah. So if you get say you get a speeding ticket, right?
Yep.
If you just call the number and pay the ticket, you are pleading guilty to the charge of speeding. Okay?
Yeah.
And what happens is that gets reported to your insurance company, and you're going to end up paying at least $1,000 more in insurance premiums over the next few years. Right?
Yeah. In addition to the cost of the ticket.
In addition to the cost of the ticket, that's right. And so I do. Yeah, it's not. I don't make a ton of money on it, but if you get a traffic ticket, I can help you keep it off your driving record, as long as you're not out there, getting 5 speeding tickets a year. Then it becomes more difficult to help you.
You ain't learning your lesson over time.
Exactly. You get one every once in a while. Yeah, give me a call. I can help keep it off your driving record.
There you go. So yet another service that they offer at Bartage Law. Now tell people how they can get in touch.
Yeah. So 225-364-9182. That's my direct number. You call me, you get me. If I don't answer, I'll call you back. And then my email is just Ben, BEN, at bartagelaw.com. BARTAGELAW.com.
Perfect. You had fun today, man?
I had a great time. I
thought this was a pretty good podcast.
I think so.
I may need to talk to Ben, do his own podcast one day. Call it the Law Review with Ben or something. I don't know. We'd come up with something snappy, but we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jim.
You've always done really good work for me. Again, all those services we just mentioned, if you're in need of any of those, I really, really recommend and stand behind Ben Bartage and Bartage Law to help you with those things. So we'll link everything you need in the description of this video or audio, whichever you're listening to, and you can get more information. So thank you again, sir, for coming by.
Thank you, Jim.
Until next time, I'm Jim Chapman, reminding you to love your community, support local business, just like Bartage Law, and keep leading. Thank you very much.